Okay, can you start from now? Just ignore the first 9 minutes. Okay? Yeah. So today we'll go through the simulation procedure first. Okay? And then we'll have our usual lecture. Okay, so the first assignment was to simulate OFDM in a very simplified setting, right? Additive white Gaussian noise channel. Okay, there is no coding involved. Okay, so let's draw the block diagram format. That's it, you transmit, right? And then basically you add additive white Gaussian noise NK, and then you take an FFT. Okay, then you'll compare XK with XK hat and calculate the number of errors. Okay, we said XK to be BPSK symbols, right? XK takes values from the set with equal probability. The first step in the simulation is to generate XK for one OFDM symbol. So we're going to simulate one OFDM symbol first. Okay? The aim is to simulate then you can concatenate a sequence of OFDM symbols. Okay? Let's look at simulation of one OFDM symbol. So I asked you to take endpoints. Okay? In a real system, you specify the bandwidth, right? In a real system, we specify the bandwidth, subcarrier spacing, n used, what else? TOFDM, TCP. All these things will be simulated. All these things will be specified. But everything can be abstracted back to this model, right? That we have discussed. Right? We discussed at length how the whole thing can be boiled down to a discrete time implementation of this kind. Okay, so we don't have to go through all that. But you have to remember that the simulation is done for this set of parameters. So you have to link this with this model. Okay. So we'll just talk about simulation of this kind, then we can go back and loosely relate with these parameters. Okay. So we are going to first generate. The first step is we need to generate XK. K ranging from 0 to n minus 1. We'll assume arbitrarily n. Of course, you can load only a subset of them if you wish. Okay, for the time being, let's say it's n samples. Okay. So we already specified that xk is a binary random variable. It takes values +1, -1 with equal probability. So you have to talk about generating these random variables in MATLAB. So we're going to assume we're going to use MATLAB. So how do we generate +1, -1 with equal probability? Well, one way of doing this is MATLAB gives you the option of generating a uniform random variable, right? There's a function called rand. It has zero mean. Well, it's basically a uniform random variable. The distribution of this random variable, let's say y, some random variable y. Okay. This is a uniform random variable, uniformly distributed between 0 and 1. So when you have one instance of rand invoked in MATLAB, it gives you a number between 0 to 1. And whatever the numbers MATLAB gives you between 0 to 1, they are uniformly distributed between 0 to 1. That means the probability of occurrence of any number within a small interval, as long as the interval length is the same, it's equal. Okay? So from rand, you can generate binary random variables by simply generating y, and you compare with, if it is greater than 0.5, you declare it as 1, else it is minus 1. So it's like generating another random variable from a known distribution. So if you generate a number, if it falls in this half, you assign plus 1. If it falls in this half, you assign minus 1. Now, plus 1 and minus 1 that you generate in this manner have equal probability. Right? It should be, because any number that falls within this strip has the same probability as the other number that falls within this strip. Both strips have equal probability. So, in MATLAB, all you have to do is generate rand, right? It gives a number between 0 to 1, and just say rand greater than 0.5, and then it automatically gives you 1 and minus 1. Maybe it gives you 1 and zeros in MATLAB, right? So it gives you 1 and zeros. Yeah, I mean, any case you want. Round? No, you cannot round. See, you have to put a threshold and compare, not round.
Yeah, so round threshold.
Okay, 0 to 1.
You can find, since it's a matrix, you can find 1 and find 0.
Yeah, if it is between 0 to 0.5, it is 0. If it is 0.5 to 1, it will give you 1. So, anyway, however you wish to write the code. Okay, so this is how you generate plus 1 and minus 1. I don't want you to use the mod and demod functions. Okay, at this level, when you learn how to simulate a communication system, don't use built-in functions like mod, demod, awgn. They are meant for people, who are experts. I mean, right now you're still learning the ropes. Okay, once you know all these things, then you can go on use built-in functions. Okay, don't use built-in functions, because once you use the built-in function, the amount of learning is very limited for you. Okay, so this is how you will generate plus 1 minus 1. If you want QPSK, well, it's very simple. You can take xk plus square root of minus 1 multiplied by some yk or whatever it is, and you generate both of them independently. So you get a QPSK constellation. If I ask you to simulate QPSK, you can do it that particular way. If I ask you to generate 16 QAM or 8 PSK, PSK is easy. You generate, well, actually what you should do is, if you have points 0 to m minus 1, there is a command called randint, and it picks one integer from 0 to m minus 1. You pick that integer and you have a constellation lookup table, okay, and you map every one of these points to a constellation. That's another way of doing it. Okay, you have a constellation, m point constellation. It's a table, right? So it's a table. 0 maps to 1, 1 maps to 0 maps to minus 1, 1 maps to 1. This is the table. And use randint where m is set a value of 2, then it gives you two numbers, either 0 or 1, with equal probability, and you take that number and use the lookup table and read the values. That's another way of simulating it. Okay? And when the constellation size is large, this is probably how you want to do it. If there is a 64 QAM constellation, you pick one point randomly between 0 to 64 and go to the lookup table. There are 64 entries in this lookup table, 0 to 63, and for each point there is a associated value, that is the constellation. Something like this, right? These are the point in constellations. You assign 0, 1 up till whatever the number, minus 1, and you do a randint and then look it up. That's another way of simulating the values of xk. But for the time being, it's very simple. You can just do a rand and then threshold it. Okay? That's the first step. So we generate xk and you store those values, n values, and you use what we call IDFT, but you use the IFFT command. Okay? When you use the IFFT command or FFT command, you should realize that MATLAB always deals with point 0 to n minus 1, and this half is the positive quadrant, positive axis, and this half is the negative axis. When you give a sequence, see, MATLAB doesn't deal with negative indices, especially the FFT routine. In fact, MATLAB doesn't deal with negative indices. Okay, it always takes, in fact, it starts with 1. Okay, so what you have to do is you take this IFFT command, and when you run the IFFT command, and remember the signal that you generated, S of t, summation over okay, we'll drop cyclic prefix for the time being. If you don't have negative numbers, it's fine. But if at all, if the signal had both positive and negative axes, you have to be careful in using the FFT and IFFT command. That's something you have to watch out for. Okay? In this case, t spans from 0 to t over ft. So you take the IFFT command. Of course, there is a scaling involved when you use IFFT. You should watch out for the scalings, right? FFT and IFFT, see what the scalings are involved in MATLAB. So, and you have to take care of the transmit power normalization accordingly. So, use the IFFT command, then you get the samples. Okay, in the first exercise, you don't have to add the cyclic prefix, and you make sure that the transmitted signal has unit power. How do you do that? Well, first of all, this constellation you have to normalize it to unit power. In this case, it is +1 -1. Okay. And if at all MATLAB has any scalings associated with IFFT, you can simply check the power contained in the transmitted sequence. You can just calculate the total energy contained in all the samples and divide by the length of the sequence, and you see if that number is close to 1. Okay? I mean, it won't be exactly 1 because there are a lot of sequence of random numbers involved. That's a way of checking the transmit signal power. Okay, always do that. Now you have to generate NK. Okay. See, when we define the system in an analog using analog signals, n of t, we talked about n of t having a power spectrum of n0, which is equal to kt, right? That is a noise power spectral density. Then you go through a low pass filter, and then you sample it, and then go through FFT. So signal to noise ratio was defined as SNR per subcarrier was. How did we define it? 1 divided by sigma x square divided by n0, which is k into t, multiplied by delta f. So we will allow the entire signal power to have unit power. So sigma x square will set it to 1, and the total transmitted signal will have unit power, or we will set, yeah, we can do that. We can set all the transmitted signal power to have unit power. And then n naught into delta f, we'll call it sigma n square. And once you specify an SNR of, let's say, 10 dB, let's say SNR equal to 10, we choose the signal power to be 1, and sigma n square will be 1 over 10, that is equal to 0.1. So that is the variance of the thermal noise. Okay, so we don't have to worry about what is the value of delta f and n naught. We don't want to get into that. We'll assume the signal power is normalized to have unit power, and noise variance will have so much power, since SNR is specified. Okay, so things like bandwidth and all don't come into picture here. Right now it's not dB, it is a number. If SNR was specified in dB, then this should be 10 raised to SNR in dB divided by 10. Does it make sense? If the SNR was specified in dB, you have to take 10 raised to SNR in dB by 10, and that will be the SNR, which is the numerical on the linear scale. Okay? So now you know the noise variance. So this is the noise variance for each sample nk. Or we shouldn't use k here, probably some double. What did we use? Huh? No, this is time domain, right? This is S of L. This is N of I, or S of I and N of I. Okay, something like this. Okay. Now N of I. So you have to make sure that S of I has unit power. Okay, and you have to make sure S of I has unit power, the variance of S of I, and the variance of N of I is sigma n square. Okay, so now you'll add S of I plus N of I, second step, and what would we call this? R of I or something? And N of I is simulated as, it's a complex additive white Gaussian noise. So it has a real part, rand n, 0 mean, and variance is 0.1 in this case, plus square root of -1, rand n, 0 mean, and variance 0.1. I guess in rand n, when you use, you have to multiply this with square root of 0.1. That's how in MATLAB you have to do. 0.1? Square root of 0.1. Yeah, it's amplitude. Right? 0.1 is the power. So you have to multiply with. So what you have to do is rand n multiplied with square root of 0.1. Okay, and the whole thing is divided by root 2. Because real part and imaginary part are divided by root 2, so total power will be sigma n square. Real part square plus variance of real part and variance of imaginary part. But you make sure that S of I has also unit power. So that means the total power in S over all samples should be n in this case, right? So you should check that. Okay, so the power contained in any one sample S of I is 1. Okay, so if you do this, that's what would happen, right? The total power contained in the signal is n, and each subcarrier will have a power of unity. Okay, so basically you shouldn't put any scalings here. Okay, then you usually go through the FFT. So one way to measure the signal to noise ratio here is you calculate the total power contained in S of I. So you can calculate the ratio should be close to the SNR prescribed. Is that right? Huh? The ratio should be close to the SNR. So you can also put 1 over n and 1 over n. It doesn't matter. Huh? That's the way of checking. So if there are any problems with normalization, it will show. Similarly, when you go to frequency domain, you have a signal, the third point, R of k, which is x of k plus n of k. Now, your signal power should be SNR in this case is signal power is sigma x square, which is 1 sigma x square divided by variance of sigma nk square. Okay? Should probably do it, but check the variance of n of I and n of k. What is the variance of n of k? That is n times sigma n square. Is that what it is? After the DFT? Should be, right? That means this variance should be 1 over n times. And if x of k has unit power, then s of I should have 1 over n anyway, you calculate it, whatever it is, okay? As long as you maintain this SNR, that's sufficient. Once you go to frequency domain, everything else follows. Okay? So you make sure the SNR in time domain is maintained. Okay? Then you calculate what the SNR is. You may see a scaling here or. Okay? So just check that. How did you implement it?
This one.
Yeah.
I took FFT and then added the noise.
What is the variance?
Variance means I have taken different SNRs, 0
No,
to 10.
no, no. What is the variance of noise you added?
Noise, that's what, 0 to 10 dB.
Right.
Taken the SNR.
Right.
And then I divided it 1 by SN means in 10 or something and multiplied it to n. I fixed the signal power to 1 and changed the noise.
Like this?
Yes.
You did exactly like this. So S of I, you made sure it is 1
Yes.
in time domain.
Yes.
So you scaled it such that the sample S of I has unit power. The total power in Si square, is it equal to n?
I haven't checked that, but I have scaled it before doing IM.
Oh, you did a scaling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you did this way basically. And then you passed it through FFT, and then did you see a scaling here or 1?
Means the reverse, we have to scale it to the
Huh?
reverse.
Once you scale the signal power to 1, the transmitted signal power to 1,
Right.
you don't need a scaling.
No, but at each subcarrier you will see 1 over n as the power in the subcarrier.
We have to reverse scale it
So-
while doing the.
So when you do FFT,
See, the way I've defined DFT and IDFT, there are no scalings involved.
yeah,
Right? But MATLAB does it differently. So it has 1 over n in the pre-scaling that probably took care of it.
By root n.
Oh, it has root n? Okay, that's okay. Is it as 1 over n or root n? Check that. See, that is the problem with what you do in the class and what you do in MATLAB. The scalings are not quite the same.
Exactly 1 over.
For what? IFFT, there is no scaling.
No, while doing IIF.
Oh, both of them have 1 over square root n.
FFT, when you do an FFT, there is root involved.
Huh?
And while doing IIFT, you have to take 1 by
both
root
have a
n.
scaling factor.
Both have a?
Scaling.
So that's why I'm saying, independent of what scaling they have used, you make sure this S of I, the total power contained in it. So the total energy contained in the signal is sigma S of I square. Divided by the number of sample is the total power contained in the signal. You make sure that is unity. Okay? And similarly, the variance per sample is sigma n square. There are n samples, n times sigma n square, and divided by n, it is sigma n square. So each sample will have variance of sigma n square, right? In that case, what would be the variance of each sample? It would be 1, right? 1 times sigma s square, which is an n sample. Okay, so basically maintain this definition. Okay. So independent of what scaling MATLAB uses, as long as you check this out, then you'll be fine. Otherwise, you go through the scalings involved in MATLAB, check that, and then you work it out. Okay? You see the point? Okay, also MATLAB uses indices from 1 to n. And here we start from 0 to n minus 1. So you have to take care of that
It also
change.
works in column wise. If you take the signal row wise, then by doing FFT it won't work.
Yeah, all those things you have to handle. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if especially when you have a matrix and then you take FFT, you have to be careful whether the FFT is applied on the columns or on the rows. If it's just one string, it doesn't matter whether it is row or column. It just takes FFT. Okay. Okay. That's why it's good to be familiarized with MATLAB. But these things are simple. You can do it. Okay. So this is like simulating one OFDM symbol. Okay. So you have demodulated it. How do you demodulate? Rk equal to xk plus nk. Make sure what is the scaling here. I mean, that is the variance of xk. You have to figure it out. Okay. For BPSK, it is simple because you are going to make decisions by comparing Rk with what is the threshold? 0. Right? The decision is Rk greater than 0 is 1, else minus 1. You make these decisions and then compare the final decisions with the transmitted sequence, because which is available in the simulation, and you count the number of errors. Okay? The fifth step is count the number of errors. Okay? And then you repeat this procedure, let us say 100 times or 1000 times, because you want to find the error rate. Error rate will be number of errors divided by the number of bits transmitted. But since this is a short segment, it won't converge. Okay? So what you should do is, don't calculate the probability of error right away. You count the number of errors, repeat this entire procedure a number of times, then add all the errors that you accumulated, divide by the total number of bits that you have transmitted in so many trials. Don't average the bit error rate ratios. Well, okay, the average, accumulate the errors in so many trials, divide by the total number of bits you have transmitted in all those trials, then you will get an estimate of probability of error. Of course, for up to 10 raised to minus 3, you will get good estimate. If you want 10 raised to minus 6, then you have to perform this simulation a large number of times. Okay? So you can repeat this 1000 times or 10,000 times. And the longer you repeat, the more accuracy you will get in estimating the bit error rate. And compare that with the Q function. What is the theoretical probability of error? You know that, right? For BPSK. that you calculate in MATLAB. There is a function called Q function or complementary error function in MATLAB. Use one of them and get it. You know the relationship between Q function and complementary error function? Well, just Google it. Okay, they are very similar. They're just rearranged version of each other. Okay, MATLAB I think has a command called ERF. ERFC also is there. And Q also is there. Okay, fine. If it is there, you can use it. And when your simulation is correct, whatever the bit error rate you have got should exactly match with the theoretically expected error rate. So you don't have to come to me whether it is correct or not. If it is correct, you will see it. You have calculated the probability of error for BPSK before in digital communications? No? Forgot.
We know the formula.
Huh?
We know the formula.
What is it?
Error probability formula.
Oh, you didn't derive it.
We derived.
You have derived from the first principles, right?
Yes.
Formulas have no meaning. Formulas have no meaning in this world. Just you have to derive everything from first principles. Okay. Then you can remember the formula. It is useful. Okay. So now, with the next modification I suggested is add a cyclic prefix here. Okay. Add a cyclic prefix. What is the cyclic prefix? The last short segment that is appended before transmission. And choose a number of samples. No, you choose accordingly based on the channel memory. And then, let me erase this and redo this. Okay, so the two additional modules that you are going to introduce, you are going to add the cyclic prefix, which you know how to do, okay, and then you are going to convolve the transmitted sequences of I or S tilde I, what we call, with an FIR channel. It's not a circular convolution. It's a linear convolution, and this channel is modeled as so L taps, where L you specify, anywhere from 1 to 5 or 10. L takes values from 1 to, let us say, 5. And each tap H of L is simulated as complex normal, 0 mean and variance 1 over L, so that the total power contained in the channel is unity. It's a statistical channel, so sum of variances of all the taps is unity. How do you generate H of L? Well, just like the way we did. This would be generated as H of L and this whole thing is divided by 1 over square root of L, because each tap has a variance 1. And H of L, you repeat this in a for loop L times, so that you will get IID channels. Or you can do it in vector domain. Random can generate, a vector of L samples. Okay, depending on how you want to do it.
We can generate matrix.
You can also generate matrix, but for the time being, its vector is enough. Okay, so this is one instance of the Rayleigh fading channel. That means in a block of 1 millisecond or for some time, this is the channel which is assumed to be constant. And this channel will take a new value after some 20 milliseconds. So we will assume block fading model where for some time this takes a constant value. There is no time variation. If you want to introduce time variation, you have to model each tap using a Jakes model. that we have studied in wireless course, which will continually change in time. Okay? So we don't want to do that. Let's not complicate it. We'll assume this quasi-static. What is quasi-static? Channel takes a constant value for a block of time, and then it takes a new value from one block to the other. So you simulate a block of OFDM symbols and convolve all the OFDM symbols with this channel. To simplify the matters, you just take one OFDM symbol, you convolve that one OFDM symbol with one instance of the channel, right? And then go through the add noise, go through the FFT, and then demodulate. When you demodulate, you will have HK here, and HK you have to compute again in MATLAB. And at the receiver, you have to scale it, the RK by HK, so that you can make decisions. Otherwise, the decision boundaries will get skewed if you don't scale it with HK, because it's a complex number. It's not real. Okay? Because this is HK is a complex number. So you have to put HK conjugate so that this becomes real, and then you can compare with the decision boundaries.
When you convolve this one,
Right. Then you have to remove the CP here. Okay, that part, let me write it. So when you convolve, obviously you will get n plus L minus 1 samples. So what you will do is, you will remove CP. That means the first, what is the length of CP? Whatever the length, right? CP length has,
you get more than n plus L minus 1. Because you are convolving with a channel of small l.
it is.
CB is capital L, so then it
Yeah,
will be-
actually, I mean total n bar plus L, n bar plus L minus 1 you will get. Okay, so n bar includes the CP also. So what you do is, you first discard the first all the CP samples, discard CP, received samples corresponding to the CP length. Discard, that's what we call discard CP. Okay. Once you discard CP, then you start counting from there and collect n samples from there, and you will discard whatever is there in the end. Okay. Because convolution lengthens, right? So discard CP, start counting, then basically eliminate CP, then start collecting samples, n samples from there. So you will get n samples, go through n point, FFT, and then demod. Does it make sense?
So we are continuously varying the number of taps randomly.
No, you fix L. Fix L for the entire simulation. You don't change it. For the entire simulation, fix L. And calculate the probability of error. So I said you generate one OFDM symbol, one channel, count the errors. When you go back in a for loop, another OFDM symbol, a new channel. When you put in a for loop, automatically it will generate a new channel, just to speed up the simulation. Otherwise, truly speaking, you have to take a whole block of OFDM symbols, convolve with one channel which is constant for the whole block, and then repeat this procedure. That's how you should do it, but I'm trying to simplify it for you. And then calculate the probability of error, and the effects of the channel will be visible. And when you plot the bit error rate for L equal to, they should all be approximately the same, because the diversity order is 1 since there is no coding. So whatever the length of channel, if you run the simulation long enough, you will get the same type of bit error rate. Of course, it won't be so sharp. It will be, there will be a degradation because of fading. That you will see. It will be more like this. Okay? This is not too difficult. Once you get the basic simulation, you have to generate, add CP, generate, discard, and get it. Okay? You should be able to do this in less than an hour. Okay? This is the second assignment. Okay? And I hope you can show this to me on Monday. Okay? Those who are not totally familiar with MATLAB, don't use, things like vectors and all. Just put for loops. As much as possible, use for loops. But people who are really good at MATLAB, they never use for loops. Because if you use for loops in MATLAB, simulations slows down quite a bit. MATLAB doesn't like for loops. Everything has to be put in terms of vectors and matrices, and MATLAB gives you that flexibility. When you do that, it's super fast. Simulation is very fast. Okay. In addition, I have given you a code that gives you a Viterbi encoder and decoder, which you have to just integrate. You don't have to write a convolution encoder and decoder. There is a channel code, that is assignment 3. I have given you the Viterbi encoder. It's on my website. You download it. You have to put a pseudo random interleaver. Okay, same setup. One OFDM symbol. You have to generate source bits accordingly. You have to work backwards. If you have n equal to, let's say, 512, if it's the rate half code, you have to generate half the number of bits. Right? Feed half the number of bits. Encode. Use a pseudo random interleaver. MATLAB has a function, I think srand or something. Put an interleaver. Then generate xk. You don't have to generate xk like this, but you have to generate the source in this manner. Okay? You have to generate the source, zeros and ones in this manner, and transmit, receive, demodulate, and don't make hard decisions. Pass, take RK, multiply with HK conjugate or divide, and then pass this through the Viterbi decoder. Don't make hard decisions. When you do that, when you change L, the error rate will change. Why is that? Yeah, when you introduce channel coding, what happens? That effect kicks in. It's not so obvious, but the diversity order will come into picture. You can check the slopes and all that. You can vary the code rate, and you can see what is the effect in the receiver. You will truly see the diversity benefit through channel code. Diversity benefit through channel code. If you use the code with a weak rate, let's say 2/3, and if the channel is length 2, then you will not get full diversity. You can see all those things. Once you set it up, you can experiment with it. Okay, those who are absent, probably they can still go through the video and get this. That's a good thing about these video lectures. They're all on my website. No, I uploaded 5 lectures, and this I'll get it hopefully tomorrow. Or you can get a copy from him. Yes. Any questions? No, I didn't put in Moodle. You go to my website. There is what is called course start. There is a link in the email. There is a link to my homepage. It's Google Sites. Okay, just check my email. Okay. Go to, or just Google my name and it will appear. Click on courses start, and then I put all the video lectures on YouTube. You can go and watch them in any time. Okay. As it is, the whole lecture will be visible there. Any questions? Anybody who is going to work on wireless after you graduate? Anyone? Huh? You don't know it. You got job offers. You should have an idea. Huh?
No wireless companies come.
No, they didn't. So you have a different kind of jobs. What sort? Information technology. I see. Well, when you get bored, you can come to study wireless or get a wireless job in this field. Okay. Anybody going for a master's degree or PhD? Here? Where are you going? Huh? Ann Arbor. Okay. What are you going to study there? Okay. Signal and image processing use a lot of nowadays. It's very hot, especially video or wireless. It's a big topic, video or wireless, because you see a lot of demand for video or wireless. So people are working on that very actively. Okay. But these principles are universal. Whatever we study in digital communications, the same thing apply in signal processing. Well, there are some core principles which we apply, especially in receiver design and things like that. You'll see one example today. Okay, today we need to conclude the discussion on the link level characterization of OFDM based systems. We'll briefly look into what is called single carrier FDMA. Okay, which is a tweak of OFDM. We'll discuss that today, and see why we want to consider such a modulation technique as opposed to OFDM. Okay, have you heard the name single carrier FDMA? Have you heard FDMA? You know FDMA, right? TDMA? Okay. In digital communications, have you studied Nyquist pulse shaping?
Pulse shaping we have.
You have not done. You only studied up till modulation and demodulation.
We know we have some idea about Nyquist pulse. We studied this cosine, raised cosine, we studied cosine.
No, I'm talking about band limited channel design, like pulse design for 0SI. You didn't study? You didn't get there. Okay. Usually,
Cosine is also pulse shaping, right?
raised cosine where?
Means in making the pulse. We have to make
Where? A transmitter.
yeah, transfer.
You studied that?
Yes, yes.
All right. So anyway, we'll see that now. Okay, we'll have a lecture for about 40 minutes or so. So what we are going to do is traditionally single carrier systems. Let's give a bit of history here. I think you're all familiar with this, right? These are traditional single carrier transmissions. Okay. Have you seen this kind of representation? XK is a modulation sequence, and P is a pulse that carries this modulation sequence. You need a pulse to carry the modulation sequence, right? You can't transmit XKs as they are. Right? That's not possible. Right? You need a waveform to carry it. And the waveform could be rectangular, which you understand, right? That is, XK takes, P of T could be so if it is, maybe we'll just normalize with the total transmit energy to unity. So this could be one form of P of T, is it? This is what you probably assume when you did digital communications, BPSK, QPSK, right? That makes it simpler. And at the receiver, you would have applied a match filter, right? Match to this pulse P of T, and sample, or a correlation based receiver, and sample at T equal to KT, and you get a sequence, and then sequence of observations, and you make decisions. Maximal excitation. That's probably how it is formulated. Okay, maybe you have not seen this in this form, because sometimes in the books they only transmit X of K with this a single snapshot sometimes. Here I am concatenating all of them as a continuous waveform. That's how it should be represented. Because P of T need not be confined to 0 to T. It can span. That could be a valid pulse. But the problem with something like this is that if it goes out of this boundary 0 to T, it creates intersymbol interference. Right? One symbol interferes with the other, or one symbol has contribution from symbols past and future. Okay, that's called intersymbol interference. Okay, there is a criteria. There is a criteria that's discussed in PROC is it's called chapter title is band limited signal design or something like that. If you want at the receiver after you apply match filter and sample at right instance, if you want 0 SI, right? That's what you want, right? 0 SI from if you are interested in detecting XK, you should have 0 contribution from XK minus 1 and XK plus 1 and so on and so forth. 0 SI, and at the same time this pulse should occupy the minimum possible bandwidth. Okay, and if you work out this with these two constraints, if you work it out, it turns out that there exists a class of pulses that satisfy this criteria. That is, the bandwidth of this S of t, the power spectral density, if you get it, or the bandwidth of this pulse should be strictly band limited. Total bandwidth is 1 by t, strictly band limited, and the pulse does not produce any ASI. But if the pulse has a Fourier transform which is strictly band limited, what is then P of t in this case? P of t is the sync pulse. And sync pulse has infinite duration. However, if you apply a match filter and sample at the precise right instance, the sync has perfect zero crossings and you will recover your transmitted data XK without interference from neighboring symbols. Okay, we will not derive this today, but we will approach this from a different perspective. And this criteria can be generalized, and you can have a pulse such that you can introduce some extra bandwidth, but still, and in time it has a shape like it's called raised cosine, square root raised cosine pulses. They also satisfy 0 SI criteria, but they incorporate certain excess bandwidth, and that helps because sometimes if it is a timing offset, sync is notoriously suffers from ISI, whereas square root raised cosine, they are less immune to timing errors. Okay. This is traditionally called single carrier transmission because, see, you have one carrier and that carrier carries entire bandwidth as a single carrier because this is modulated onto a carrier frequency FC. Whereas in OFDM, you have a set of discrete subcarriers and we modulate them onto a carrier frequency. So it's called multi-carrier or OFDM, whereas this is called single carrier because you don't have multiple carriers because the transmission is in time domain. The transmission is in time domain, receiver also operates in time domain. Whereas in OFDM, we go back and forth between time and frequency. Okay, so this is the classical single carrier transmission. The pulse P of t can take many forms. One is rectangular, and P can be like a half a sinusoid or something like that. That gives you what is called minimum shift keying. So there are a lot of different pulses, okay, that you can talk about, and each pulse has a different bandwidth characteristic. Then what is the fundamental difference between this type of transmission and OFDM? Why do you have these two different transmissions? Well, the biggest difference or the largest difference is that if this goes through a multipath ISI channel, you need sophisticated equalization to recover your data. Okay, these pulses are designed with certain property, right? The sync, this XK with sync pulse forms an orthonormal basis. At the receiver, you can perfectly recover XK as long as the channel doesn't distort this transmission. But if the channel has a lot of ISI, then you have to build a sophisticated equalizer. Whereas in OFDM, as we have seen, the receiver is fairly simple. You go to frequency domain and you scale the received signal by HK or something like that. But on the other hand, it relies on channel coding to get the diversity benefit. Single carrier transmissions, need a sophisticated equalizer like a linear equalizer and a DFE, and the diversity benefit can be accrued by the equalizers without relying on the channel code. So they work a little differently. But even apart from these differences in terms of receiver implementation and complexity, there is one more key difference. That is the peak to average power of this transmitted signal. Have you heard this? PIPR. The peak to average power. What is the peak to average power? This is a random signal, right? Xk because of Xk. It has a peak. The signal waveform has a peak and it has average. The ratio of, well, this is defined as peak to average power ratio. If the peak to average power ratio is high, what it means is that this signal S of t has a lot of swings in time domain. Okay. Ideally, you need a transmitted signal whose envelope is unity. Like absolute value of S of t, if it is 1, that is square root of real part square plus imaginary part square, should be 1. Then it's an ideal signal in terms of power amplification. Okay, why is that? Well, this is a baseband signal. You're going to pass this signal through a RF power amplifier. And power amplifiers have what is called these characteristics: input power or voltage, let's call voltage, or input power, that is the instantaneous input power at that given point in time, and then output power. If the input signal whose magnitude is unity all the time, then you can operate it anywhere you want. These are the characteristics of a RF power amplifier, class C power amplifier. Input power, you get so much input power, you get so much output power. I can operate right here and you get maximum, you can deliver maximum power at the output of the power amplifier and you transmit it. Because you want to transmit at so much power, 10 watts, 5 watts, whatever it is. If the input signal in envelope is always 1, then you can operate at this point and just near the saturation and you get maximum power and the signal will not be distorted. Signal will not be distorted. And there is a class of signals which are called continuous phase modulation signals whose envelope is always 1. How do you get one? Well, FM, digital FM. S of t e raised to analog FM, like an equivalent, you can consider digital FM. Its envelope is always 1. Put a J here. So continuous phase modulation signals are very useful for RF power amplification because you can operate at the saturation point. That's why in satellite links you generally tend to use continuous phase modulation signals, but they are nonlinear modulations. You can see that, right? E raised to, they are nonlinear modulations, but they are very good for RF power amplification because you can operate at saturation point and you get the maximum efficiency out of the PA. Well, what does it mean? If you have a signal of this kind which exhibits, let us say, a factor of 5 swings, right? S of t, if you have a sync pulse, the waveform has lot of swings up and down, right? So if I operate here, let's say operating point, the waveform can have all these swings, right? When it goes here, this swing, it gets clipped. It has large swings, some of them will get clipped. These swings will not be faithfully reproduced because there is a nonlinearity. So the output will be a distorted version of input because this is not a linear. It's not a linear characteristic. So whenever you have such distortion, the spectrum of the signal will get altered. So instead of having a spectra like this, if it goes through a nonlinear power amplifier, you may see a characteristic like this. Because whenever it goes through a nonlinear device, the side lobes would grow. The side lobes growing means, well, it leaks into the adjacent channels, or it needs more bandwidth. Well, actually, the signal is distorted. Even recovering the signal is not easy, right? It creates a penalty. So, any signal with a lot of swings in the envelope of the input S of t, I'm not talking about RF carrier here. This is again modulated onto e to the power j2 pi fct, but that has unit envelope, right? E to the power j2 pi fct. It is just the baseband waveform. If it has amplitude swings, that's not good for RF power amplification. Okay. Luckily, this kind of waveforms are sort of acceptable because the PAPR metric, if it is 1, that is ideal. Peak and average are the same, right? For QPSK, the PAPR is on the order of 5 or 6 decibels. So there is a factor of 4 swing around the mean for PPSK. So if we change it to 16 QAM, the swings will increase because 16 QAM has points all over the constellation. The swings will increase. So depending on these constellation points, if they have lot of, right, 64 QAM has a lot of points in a square grid, so the peak and average will be different. So the PAPR will increase depending on XK and also depending on P of t. But OFDM is even worse. Why is that? It is a sum of a large number of random waveforms with different frequency shapes. What do you think it will produce? Something like a Gaussian random variable, say if you invoke in center limit there. The amplitude S of t will behave like a complex Gaussian random variable. That means it can take a value around a mean and then lot of swings. And what is the upper and lower limits for this? If all xk's are 1 and if they all add coherently, you will see n 1 bound and minus n another bound, 0 in the middle, and the probability of occurrence of plus n and minus 1 will be, let's say, 0.001, 0.001, and this will be high, 0.5, and then it will have Gaussian distribution, something like this, right? Each value has a probability associated with it because these are all random. So it's like a truncated Gaussian distribution, but the swings can be very large. Of course, plus n and minus n is a large number, right? So they occur with low probability, but you will see a lot of swings, and the PAPR is found to be on the order of 10 dB. 10 dB is a factor of 10. The swings are on the factor of 10. So what do you do? In practice, instead of operating here, you give a back off by a factor 10 and operate. So if TDMA operates here, this kind of single carrier FDMA operates. This is called single carrier FDMA. It operates here. OFDM has to operate here because it has much more higher swings. Okay, what does it mean? The output power will be reduced. So when you apply a back off, that means you are operating the PA here, then the output power will be reduced. So you have a large PA which can potentially deliver a lot of power, but because of modulation you have to back it off. So the output power goes down, so the coverage of the base station will reduce. Instead of 10 watts, you transmit 1 watt. So the choice of the modulation has a large effect on the link budget. Okay, so in the downlink, when you serve many users, anyway you are going to combine the waveforms of many signals. So it doesn't matter whether you use this or this. Anyway, they are combined in one PA power amplifier because you're serving many users. So there will be a lot of these peaks. But in the uplink, only one user is transmitting in his own handset. So it's very important to select the modulation in the uplink so that you have a small battery. You want to operate it more efficiently. So if you use OFDM in the uplink, you have to apply a back off, so you lose the transmit power. Instead, if you use something like this, you would get a higher transmit power. This is purely from the link budget point of view. For GSM, they use something like this. CDMA, they use something like this. But in 4G LTE, downlink uses OFDM. Uplink uses what is called DFT pre-coded OFDM that behaves like this. It's not transmitted like this, but which we will discuss. It behaves like this. Okay? So we'll show that in a moment. How do you make a tweak to OFDM and come up with something like this? That's a very interesting transmission. So the entire circuit is OFDM. You make some tweak and make the system behave like this, because to synthesize a waveform like this, you need entire different type of circuitry, right? But we'll use the OFDM framework, we'll make a small tweak and make the system behave like this. That's the nice thing about it. Okay, that we will do in a couple of minutes. And in the uplink, you can use what is called DFT pre-coded OFDM or single carrier FDMA, which is good for RF power amplification. And in the downlink, you use OFDMA, which is very flexible. You can give 5 tones to one user, 10 tones to another user. I mean, you can really distribute the resources in a very flexible manner. By the way, you can take your OFDM waveform and calculate the peak and average. You can do it right away. You can see that it's around 10 dB. Just take max of the signal and calculate the average power, square of the max, take the ratio and convert to decibels. You'll see it around 10 dB. Okay, you can do it very quickly. So you can try it out. So we're going to make a small modification to OFDM and call it what is called DFT pre-coded OFDM. It's also called single carrier FDMA. Strictly speaking, you shouldn't call it single carrier FDMA because we're operating in the context of OFDM signals, but it just people's preference. They still call it single carrier FDMA for the reason we'll describe shortly. So you know OFDM X of K, right? Yeah. So let's not use X of K. We'll use something else. We have data that we want to transmit A of K. Okay, K does not necessarily denote frequency domain here, but just an index, okay? And this is the data you want to transmit. Just like, OFDM has X of K, this is the data we want to transmit. Instead of X of K, we'll just call it A of K. And we'll send it through a DFT of size M points. So the length of the sequence is M, okay? It is length of sequence is M. So you take a M point DFT. M can be any number. Okay, anywhere from 12, 24, 48, whatever it is. And then it produces what is called A of L. Okay, this is the output of the DFT. And L has M points. And you take these L points, this A of L is like X of K in OFDM. We map it onto subcarriers. Okay, we map it onto some subcarriers. We'll see what this mapping is. It's not a big deal. If M equal to N, then there is not much mapping involved here. And then we take n point I FFT add CP and then transmit. See, it's essentially like OFDM. This entire part is OFDM, right? We had a subcarrier mapping in OFDM, right? We can shift the allocation anywhere in frequency domain. Okay? Although we loaded up all the n tones, if you have a small number, you can always allocate anywhere in frequency domain. This is nothing but OFDM. So what is that additionally we have done? This module. So what have we done? We taken our data and we applied a DFT precoder to it. We applied a DFT precoder to it and then transmitted it using OFDM. And the value of m is always less than n or equal to m. Well, it should be less than. Okay. So what do you think will happen because of this precoding?
Normally, the data is in frequency.
Right. Frequency and then we went to time.
We went to time.
Here it's in time.
It's in time.
It went to frequency and then it went to time.
So we are nullifying the frequency.
Yeah, of course, if m equal to n, you may say this DFT and IFFT will cancel and you will end up with AK there. That's not correct way of looking at it because m is less than n and there will be oversampling, so it will affect a pulse shape. It will introduce a pulse shape. See, if you say m equal to n, you say there is a DFT or FFT and IFFT, nothing has happened. You end up with AK. That's not what we are going to do. M is less than n, so it will create, when you have zero padding and it will create a pulse shape, right? We'll see that. Okay, there is oversampling and it will create a pulse shape. Okay, so mathematically A of L is equal to K equal to 0 to m minus 1 A of K e to the power of minus j 2 pi KL by m L equal to 0 to m minus 1. Okay, that's what this block does. Okay, and S of t is the transmitted signal, the usual one here. Is equal to A of L, just like OFDM, right? We take this and we apply OFDM. A of L e raised to j 2 pi delta f L t, and you can add the cyclic prefix t minus TCP, where t ranges from 0 to t plus TCP or t OFDM plus TCP. Okay, now what is the range of L? Well, L can take from values from 0 to n minus 1 if you load up all of them. But let us say you want to transmit only, let's say, 180 kilohertz. Let's say you want to transmit in 180 kilohertz. Now you have a choice. You can transmit anywhere in this 20 megahertz, let us say, any portion of this band, you select and transmit, let us say, 180 kilohertz. Just as an example. So therefore, I can do a subcarrier mapping where L ranges from some index n1 to n1 plus m minus 1. What is n1? Well, it's controlling the starting point. n1 can be 0, then it goes to m minus 1. And you may say n is missing. Yes, n is not necessary because L takes values only. A of L takes values. And we probably have to shift this index L. So A of L, you do a subcarrier mapping and then you take these indices. Okay? Does it make sense? So you may say, well, L is ranging from 0 to m minus 1, but I think you have to use probably some other index, L prime L. Okay? Just because you are shifting them, it's a dummy variable. Right? L originally changed from 0 to m minus 1, but now we shifted it. Therefore, that's what the mapping module does. So I'll just put L prime there. And where A of L is mapped to AL prime. A of L is mapped to AL prime. Okay? You just take it and shift it to appropriate points. Okay, now we ask ourselves the question, how is it related to single carrier transmission, the original single carrier transmission? We can show that right away. We'll make some simple assumptions. Let's drop CP for the time being. And I'll assume n equal to m. So I'm going to load it fully. Okay, I'm going to load it, all the tones, n equal to m. And then take this equation, substitute it here, and do some manipulation and write S of t in an alternative form. Okay? And n1 is 0 because we're going to load all the tones, n equal to m. So therefore S of t becomes, instead of L prime, I'll start with L equal to 0 to n minus 1, or rather in this case, we'll keep it n minus 1, or you can put n or m, it doesn't matter, n equal to m. And I will write A of L, that is A of k e to the power of minus j 2 pi Lk by n, k equal to 0 to n minus 1, multiplied by e to the power of j 2 pi delta f L t. Okay, so now I will move A of k inside here. I'll start k equal to 0 to n minus 1. I will write A of k here, and I will write this summation. I'll flip it, L equal to 0 to n minus 1, and I'll combine these two. Okay, I'm just rearranging things. I move this inner summation to outside, and this I'll take inside. A of k will be here, and this summation will be e to the power of j 2 pi L delta f minus k by 10. Is that right?
Delta f times t.
T is there? T is there. Okay? And delta f is 1 over T OFDM. Okay? Let's substitute that. So this can be written as 1 over T OFDM, and that can be written as T minus K by T into T OFDM. K, no, it's not K by T, it's K by N, right? And the whole thing divided by T OFDM. Can I write like that? So now this whole thing can be written as sigma k 0 to n minus 1 A of k, I will write as P of T minus k times T bar, where T bar is equal to T OFDM by n, and P of T is Does it make sense? Hmm? Right? Now you tell me, what is this? that P of t. It's the IDFT of complex sinusoids L ranging from 0 to n minus 1. If I take IDFT of n points with unit amplitude, what would I get? P of t. It's a sync pulse, time limited. So I would call it not sync but digital sync. It's an approximation to sync. This P of t is digital sync pulse. Do you agree with that? They're all ones, and I take the IDTFT of these ones, right? They're all ones. You are taking e to the power j 2 pi LT by UFT. Well, it's a continuous time pulse. It okay? It behaves like a digital sync. So what did we end up with? By adding this small module, we came up with this form. What is this form? Single carrier, which we have seen, and now AK can be BPSK, QPSK, 60 QAM, 64 QAM, and the pulse shaping is an equivalent sync pulse. But this is generated in a totally different framework. We have CP and all that, right? Now the receiver processing also has to change correspondingly, and you need to introduce an equalizer, which we will deal with in the next lecture. But the point here is OFDM can be tweaked to make it look like single carrier, and this is adopted in LTE, the 4G LTE standard. Okay. Any questions? So now, if you want, you can put another DFT here and check the PAPR. In the simulation, just put a DFT here and make sure the size of M is less than N. Don't make it equal, then you'll end up with the same string. Okay, don't do that. Make M equal to, let us say, some 24 or 48. Put QPSK symbols, don't put BPSK. Or put QPSK and check the PAPR. It should be around 5.6 dB or 4 dB, depending on the length of that M. You can check that. Okay.
Sir, is there any reference kind of thing when we'll start studying and just to find out what the terms?
See, whatever you start in this class, there is no book for it. So you just have to go back to the video lectures and rely on what I say. Okay, there is no textbook for it, unfortunately. So, for example, this is like a few years old, 5 years old, this technology. So there is no book for it. And OFDM has been around for a long time, but unfortunately, I didn't find any book that I would even recommend to somebody. There is no book I could possibly recommend. It was very disappointing to see. There are many books, but I don't see them teaching the way at least I want it to be taught to undergraduate or graduate students. So people do understand OFDM well, but there are no good books that puts everything in one place. That's why, in fact, I am recording my own lecture. So anybody who wants, they can go and refer to this. Okay, there's no book, but you can go back to the video lectures and work it out yourself. This is an advanced course. That's what happens. There's no book for an advanced course normally.
Sir, why are we adding CP?
So in this context, you might be this single carrier. There is no need for CP, right?
Not in this, but in uplink, in downlink also.
Oh, downlink. Why are we adding CP? We discussed this, right? If there is a channel is AWGN, there is no need for CP. You have simulated it. When you put an FIR channel, the transmitted signal is a linear convolution between S of I and the channel, right? Whatever the channel impulse response. You get something in the receiver. You can go on and do signal processing and recover your data. That's possible perfectly. But if you want to do the processing using DFTs and IDFTs, that linear convolution will not allow you to take the FFT of the signal, right? Because when you take a received signal, if it is a convolution between A and B, if it is circular convolution, then you can transform it into FFT of A and FFT of multiplied by FFT of B. So you have to transform that linear convolution into a circular convolution. How do we do that? That's where the CP comes into the picture. You do some processing at the transmitter, take the last piece of transmitted signal, put it in the beginning, pass it through the channel, linear convolution happens, discard the first CP part. Then if you start looking at the next first sample, it has contribution ISI from the last samples of the transmitted signal, which is a circular operation. So it transforms into a circular convolution. Then you go on and take the DFTs and process it in the frequency domain. So it's a way of simplifying the system and allow DFTs to be used at the receiver. So in that assignment where we have a channel, don't use the CP and try it out. What happens? Don't use the CP, take the DFT and try to demodulate and see what happens. That's when you learn. Yeah, you'll have crosstalk. You'll have an error flow. Okay. This is, you take a linear convolution. You have n plus L minus 1, and you take the first n samples or whatever it is, and take the DFT and try to demodulate. See what happens. There won't be perfect recovery of the data, because there will be crosstalk from one carrier to another. That's what happens. Try it and you will see it. And when you introduce the CP, and you can see how cleanly you can separate things out. Anything else? You may also ask why you need a CP here. We want this to be a totally discrete time precoder. That way you can offer the entire system as a OFDM system. Okay? If you don't have the CP, then again you can't use the same reasons, DFTs at the receiver.
In actual transmitter, we'll be using a digital to analog.
Here there will be a digital to analog converter. That digital to analog converter will give something close to this. Okay, the D2A will give something. I mean, in reality there will be some imperfections, but it should give something close to this. And we sampled and showed the whole process, right? So all those modules shouldn't affect the signal flow. That's why people always represent it like this, but that's not so intuitive, because finally they should produce something like this. But that's not so obvious, right? That is a circuit design problem. You have to have a D2A that gives something like this, which we don't want to get into right now. Anything else? Okay, we'll stop it here. See, we still need 2 more lectures, because it should supposed to be 14 lectures. So when do you think we can have this additional lecture?
We could have 2 classes, schedule one after another, 2-hour class from 1 to 3 next Saturday.
Saturday. Saturday. That is 25th, right? Huh?
11 to 1.
So same. Okay, we'll do that. So I want you to complete all the simulations. Monday you should show me with the channel, and possibly by Wednesday or so with the encoder and decoder integrate. Okay.